They laughed the moment he entered the waiting room, a tired-looking man in a suit that didn't fit his shoulders, clutching a worn-out leather folder like it was the only valuable thing he owned. His shoes were scuffed, his tie slightly crooked, and there was a tiny pink hairclip stuck to his sleeve, the kind a little girl might wear. Someone pointed at it, someone else chuckled, most just smirked. Daniel Carter noticed all of it, of course, but pretended not to. He had learned, over the past 5 years as a single dad, to absorb humiliation like a sponge, quietly, without breaking, knowing he had no choice but to keep going. He sat down in the last empty chair, ignoring the whispers. He looks like he patched that suit with glue. Probably came straight from a daycare. What's he even applying for? Janitor. The receptionist looked him over with the kind of politeness that masked judgment. Mr. Carter. Yes, you're on the list, she said, as if surprised. Please wait for your name to be called. He nodded and tried to steady his breathing. This job, crisis response strategist at Hale Innovations, was his last chance before the bills crushed him. He'd prepped for weeks, watching online case studies late at night, reviewing old manuals from his previous job, brushing up on business failures and successes while Lily slept on his chest. Everything he did was for her. She was 5, bright, fragile, and still dealing with asthma attacks that came out of nowhere. He'd learned to manage those like a crisis unit. Think fast, breathe slower, don't panic, don't show fear. But employers didn't respect that. They saw gaps in resumes as laziness. They saw single fathers as baggage. They saw thrift store suits as proof of incompetence. So he didn't try to impress the waiting room. He didn't try to defend himself. He simply waited. When his name was finally called, Daniel Carter, the laughter followed him into the long hallway leading to the boardroom. The receptionist's voice echoed behind him. Good luck. But it didn't sound supportive. It sounded like you'll need it just to survive in there. He walked into a room lined with glass walls, a massive conference table, and 12 executives in tailored suits. At the center sat Victoria Hale, CEO, sharp gaze, immaculate posture, radiating the presence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Mr. Carter, she said, glancing at his resume, I see here you've been out of the workforce for 5 years. Yes, he replied calmly. I became a full-time single father. Admirable, she said, but we are a high-pressure company. We face crises daily. We cannot afford uncertainty. How do we know you can handle our pace? A few executives exchanged amused looks. One whispered, stay-at-home dad handling corporate crises. Please. Another stifled a laugh. Daniel heard every sound, but his voice remained steady. Crises don't care where you are, at home or in a boardroom. I've had to think clearly in moments where panic could hurt my daughter. I can work under pressure. Someone scoffed. Someone else muttered, is he comparing parenting to strategic operations? Victoria tapped her pen, displeased with the immaturity of her own team but showing no emotion. Our rival company, Zenitech, launched a product this morning that directly threatens our most important upcoming release. My R&D division is in chaos right now, so let's conduct a test. She leaned forward. Step outside for 5 minutes. Listen to the live call between my panicking engineers. If you can come back with something useful, anything, we'll continue the interview. If not, this ends here. He nodded, not intimidated by the challenge, only determined. Outside, in the hallway, he stood beneath the speaker where the call echoed. Voices overlapped in frantic waves. The rival outmaneuvered us. Their specs beat ours in 3 critical metrics. Our launch is ruined, unless we rebuild the integration. Rebuild? That would take weeks. Then we're done. Daniel closed his eyes, listening not to the shouting, but to the gaps between words, the places where fear clouded logic. He recognized it immediately. They were trying to fix the wrong problem. They were reacting instead of analyzing. The same mistake he'd watched doctors make when Lily had her first asthma attack. Everyone rushed, panicked, scattered in a dozen directions. He found clarity only when he forced himself to step back, breathe, and see the whole picture. 5 minutes passed fast. When he stepped back into the boardroom, the snickers had died down, replaced with annoyance that the unqualified Applicant hadn't given up yet. Victoria folded her arms. Well, she asked. Daniel took a steady breath. Your competitor didn't defeat you, he said softly. They exposed a weakness you didn't know you had. But that weakness is fixable. Quickly, if you shift your approach. That got their attention. Someone leaned forward. Someone else frowned skeptically. Victoria's voice turned sharp. Explain. Daniel did. Not with arrogance, not with desperation, just clarity. Piece by piece, he dismantled the crisis he had heard, revealing patterns the team had missed. He explained why their current integration model was too centralized. How Xenotech wasn't actually ahead. They were bluffing with short-term enhancements that created long-term vulnerability. He outlined how Hale Innovations could bypass the flaw using a parallel overlay instead of full reconstruction, saving time, money, and releasing ahead of schedule. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Not mocking, not dismissive, silent with shock. One executive whispered, How did he even see that? Another said, that's not even in the public spec sheet. A third murmured, this changes everything. Victoria stared at Daniel, not with skepticism, but with something close to awe. Repeat your last point, she said quietly. He did, slowly, confidently, and that was when every person in the room realized the laughingstock they'd mocked was the only one who truly understood the crisis. Part 2. You're suggesting we avoid a complete rebuild and instead run a modular parallel overlay for the integration? One engineer asked, leaning so far forward his glasses almost fell off. Exactly, Daniel said. You don't replace what's broken, you root around it. Your competitor's advantage is shallow. Yours is structural. You just haven't used it properly. Another executive muttered, but that would take weeks of design. Daniel shook his head. Days. Maybe less. Your groundwork is already done. Xenotech moved fast but sloppy. You've built a stable architecture, they're the ones rushing. Silence filled the room again. A long, stunned silence. The same people who had mocked his clothes, his background, his fatherhood, now watched him the way drowning sailors watch someone who has thrown them a rope. Victoria stood slowly. Mr. Carter, she said, how long did it take you to understand what our top engineers have been failing to untangle for over 30 hours? He shrugged lightly. About 3 minutes. Someone let out an actual gasp. Someone else muttered, this is unreal. She circled the table and looked him in the eyes. How? He answered simply. Because panic hides solutions. When my daughter has an asthma attack, the worst thing I can do is panic. I have to be steady, logical, calm. I had no choice but to learn how to see clearly in chaos. Her expression softened, the smallest crack in her corporate armor. Mr. Carter, she said, would you follow me to my office? He obeyed, feeling the shocked stares behind him. In her office, sleek, modern, overlooking the city, she closed the door and turned to him with a different energy. Not evaluating, not skeptical, respectful. Your idea, she said, may have just saved this company from a catastrophic failure. Do you understand the magnitude of that? I hope it helped, Daniel replied, almost shyly. But your team will still need to test and verify. They will, she said. Immediately, she sat down. Now tell me the truth. Why do you want this job? For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because the truth exposed the hardest parts of his life. Because my daughter starts school soon, he admitted quietly. She wants a new backpack. She dreams of joining a ballet class. I want her to have stability. To feel safe. I haven't been able to give her everything she deserves. Victoria listened without interrupting. His voice softened. I'm not asking for pity. I just need a chance to work. To rebuild our life. She exhaled slowly. Mr. Carter, she said, I don't give jobs out of charity. I know, but I do recognize brilliance when I see it. He blinked. Brilliance. Yes, she said firmly. What you did in there was not luck. Or coincidence. You have a mind that sees through noise. That is rare. Very rare. She stood straight. Which is why, effective immediately, I'm offering you the position of crisis response strategist. Full salary, full benefits, and flexible hours, so you never have to choose between your daughter and your career." Daniel stared at her. I don't know what to say." "Say yes." His throat tightened. "Yes." She extended her hand. He shook it with disbelief and gratitude swirling through him. "One more thing," Victoria added. "Bring your daughter tomorrow. I'd like to meet the little girl who helped you become this extraordinary." He smiled. Really smiled. For the first time in a long time. "I will." When he left the building, the sun felt warmer. The world felt lighter. People still judged him on sight, but it didn't matter anymore, not when he could finally give Lily the life she deserved. That afternoon, when he picked her up from kindergarten, Lily ran into his arms, pink hairclip missing from her ponytail. "Daddy," she squealed. "Did you fix it? The problem you told me about?" He hugged her tight, breathing in her strawberry shampoo. "Yeah, sweetie," he whispered. "I fixed it." "Yay," she giggled. "You fix everything." And for the first time in years, Daniel truly believed that maybe, just maybe, he could.